No one is coming to save you. It's time to begin thinking about our current war as a struggle that could last a generation or even longer. Like trench warfare in World War II, sometimes progress looks like advancing mere feet forward and battling for months over a single strategic objective. We have fights to win politically, culturally, personally, and ecclesiastically, and none of them will be easy. When it comes to the political, we talk about politics frequently, but we often don't dive into the actual strategy, practicals, and mechanics of how politics works. Why is that? Well, in a word, localism. See, the biggest impact most of us can have is actually not at the federal level. We only have one president, 50 senators, and 428 federal representatives, and billions of dollars are poured into influencing those particular races. But while a House representative race may cost $2.8 million to run on average, most state representative races cost barely 1/10 of that. In short, you are going to be able to have a lot more impact locally rather than nationally. You need to be thinking state, not federal, county, not country, and town, not city. This episode is brought to you by our premier sponsors, Armored Republic and Reese Fund, as well as our Patreon members and our generous donors. You can join our Patreon by going to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries, or you can make a donation by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Tune in today for your 2026 midterms game plan. Let's dive in. Yep.
Welcome.
We're back. Michael Belcher's sick.
I was going to say, we're back.
We're
minus
back. He's
one.
-1, yeah.
Yep, he's under the weather, so pray for him if you can in your thoughts. There's a little bit of sickness still going around here. But we're diving in today. I know we're starting a little bit late, but we're going to talk about a topic that I think practically it's just really going to have a lot of impact. And that's going to be talking about what it looks like to actually do politics. We obviously converse and discuss a lot politics on this show, but I think some people could get the sense like, okay, you talk about it and you expound, and we talk, of course, that culture can often be downstream of politics, right? All the approval for gay marriage didn't happen before the Supreme Court made it legal, but after. Politics has an impact that downstream of it, people say, well, this is normal, this should be accepted, this is good. And so it's profoundly impactful. But I don't think to date we've really talked about exactly what that looks like, especially on the ground, how you do it.
Right, how to actually win. No, but you're right. Like the old adage is, the politics is downstream of culture, and culture, comes from cultus, the Latin, worship. And so culture is downstream of the church, of theology. And all of that is certainly true, right? The church and its theology impacts culture, culture impacts politics. But this isn't just a one-way stream, but rather a two-way street. You're absolutely right when you think of Obergefell in 2015. That decision, right, there was certainly cultural changes that led towards that legislative decision. But upon that decision being politically made, all of a sudden, it opened the floodgates for an even more perverse and homosexual-friendly culture. One of the things that popped into my mind as you were saying that I can't help but think of the scene of one of the episodes of Seinfeld where Elaine and Jerry are visiting this restaurant, and they're having lunch. And the owner comes out and asks, "How's the meal?" He's a foreigner from some other place, and they're talking to him, and somehow the topic of abortion comes up, and he's very much pro-life, and Elaine, she's a single woman living in New York, so naturally she hates babies and wants to kill them all, and so the owner of this restaurant is saying, "No, we protect the lives of unborn children, and how anybody could think otherwise is beyond me. I can't believe that anybody would think that the child in the womb is up for grabs and that it could just be put to death." And at one point he's getting passionate about his argument, and he says, "What gives you the right? Who gives you the right?" And Elaine stands up from the table, in typical, again, single cat lady living in New York, just absolutely atrocious. And she stands up and she says, "The Supreme Court of the United States of America." Yep. Now, of course, this one didn't age very well because Jesus Christ, kind of trounced the Supreme Court of the United States of America in that terrible decision. through Supreme Court justices who overrode that decision. But at the time that this episode of Seinfeld was being made, that was, at least perceived as the law of the land. Now, technically, it was never law. It was just a Supreme Court justice.
Well, their army enforced it, right? The army of the Supreme Court?
Right. They don't have an army. Turns out you can just override judges, and you should when they're wicked. When they're wicked, if you happen to be the president of the United States, you just go and override them. Also, by the way, it's like, oh, well, we still have too many liberal judges. Yes, that's correct. Also, we have too many female judges.
Yep.
Out of 9, 4 of them are women. You will not get 30 to 40 illegal immigrants out of this country, which must happen. Millions must go back. Whenever I go to Costco, I always think trillions must go back.
I fly and I'm like, there's more here than ever.
Oh my goodness. Gazillions, more than the population of the entire world have to go back. But the point is, you're not going to send 30 to 40 million people back with 4 female Supreme Court justices, because they're not thinking in those terms. It's oh, but she's conservative. Oh, she's based in conservative. Yeah, she is a conservative mother, and praise God for it.
Yep.
That's great. But the same maternal feminine instinct that caused her to have 7 children and adopt 2 from Haiti, that same instinct is not going to load mothers and children on planes to be shipped out of our country.
Nope.
So she's great. Amy Coney Barrett, fantastic as a mom in the home. Adoption, I was adopted. That's great. Praise God. As a civil magistrate, ruling on these kinds of policies, no thank you, right? With conservatives like these, then who needs liberals?
Right.
So all that being said, yeah, he needs to just go ahead and override it. But my point was, to echo your point, back to the Seinfeld episode, we always, yes, it's true that worship influences culture. And for the record, it's not whether but which, right? So it's not just Christian worship, but whatever you worship. Demon worship influences a particular culture too. But worship, religious worship of whatever stripe it may happen to be, that influences the culture. The culture then influences politics. That's all fine and dandy. That's absolutely true. Neither you or I are denying that on this show. However, we're simply adding to that it's not a one-way stream, but a two-way street. And it works in the opposite direction as well. Sometimes politics, laws are set in place and executed in such a way that eventually shapes the heart of the people. Just like Elaine, she feels extra confident as she's arguing with this guy who's making a defense for the unborn. And she's so confident that she's right. On what basis? The culture? No. Politics. The Supreme Court.
Yep.
They said this. And so therefore it must be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I want to get across really in this episode is we need to start thinking locally. We're giving that example because it's relevant to all of us as Americans. I mean, the Supreme Court decision, it stands for the law of the land and it had a profound impact, but there's really only a handful of decisions. Obergefell being one of them, Roe v. Wade being another, others you could kind of go down the list from there. But I mean, those are the biggest Supreme Court decisions that have been made here in a very long time. But practically speaking, think about COVID, for instance. There was tons of people in California, their sheriff was great, and honestly, life continued as normal. So you, of course, have the average experience across the United States. But for you personally, for you as the individual, especially for fathers, for husbands, for landowners, for business owners, where you live is actually a lot more impactful. And even within a given state, that you could live in a red area in a blue state and have a better experience than someone in a blue area in a red state.
That's
and so
true.
We have to start thinking, as I wrote in the cold open, we're going to be in this for a while, and the battle is going to take place everywhere. It's not as though there's a single battle and we're bystanders on it, right? We're in the grandstands, we're looking on. Will Trump defy the Supreme Court? What will they do? Will they let it happen? Sure, that's one battle that has to be fought, but there are literally thousands of them that have to be fought on the ground everywhere else. I want to go ahead and show that, for one, things are certainly getting a lot more political. I think it's really helpful to kind of show people, because there can be a temptation, especially among older individuals, to feel like, well, this is politics. This is business as usual. There's always been ups and downs, always been concern, always been propaganda. Let's pull up this first image, Nate. I just want to show that this is the amount of money that goes into. This is as you're thinking about, do I run for office? Thinking about what it would take. You'll see here, this is a graph, and they're adjusted for inflation. So this is the same amount of money, be it 1998, be it 2024. And in the blue, for anyone listening, is congressional races. And in the yellow kind of orange there, that's your presidential races. And it's the amount of spending that took place across all of those races. And so from 1998, you would have nationally adjusted for inflation, about $3 billion that were spent on all of these races. Now, granted, there was not a presidential race in 98. That one came in 2000. But in 98, the congressional race, about $3 billion. Presidential race, about maybe $6 billion. Today, so this is just 25 years, things have gotten much more political, and those numbers jumped to $10 billion. So jumped about 3 times as much money being spent on congressional races and then presidential race all the way up to, take them all in total, up to 16 billion roughly. And so you're looking at 3 to 4 more times money, multiplication of money. Billions and billions and billions more dollars are flowing in politically. And you need to realize this. You need to realize that every single race, even down to mayor and state representative and this, that, or the other, they're going to take money. And taking money means that we have to have guys in business that then fund the people that are going into politics. We have to have people making money that fund candidates that they want. The point is there's no easy way out. You don't just undo a system, a $16 billion enterprise of elections every 2 years, of midterms and presidential and midterms. There's no just the Christian Prince comes in and wipes that all away. Maybe there's like a 2% chance that happens. But honestly, like you need to be thinking there's a huge apparatus. And you can start 20 years from now, like, oh, maybe we should care about these state houses and these state races. Okay. And the best time to actually start wouldn't be 20 years from now, but it would be today.
Yep.
Anything else to add there?
Yeah, no, that's well said. That's well said. Yeah, nobody likes it, but you can live in the 17th dimension or you can live in the world that actually is. And the world that actually is has a lot of corrupt things that you have to deal with. And the reality is that we live in a political world. And a political world is not inherently bad, but we live in a corrupted, fallen world that also happens to be political. So we have fallen politics, and we have injections of corrupt capital, and money.
We'll talk about dark money later.
All these kinds of things. But yeah, as you were saying that, and we're looking at 16 billion, as the number across the screen, for 2024. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know at least 100 million of that came from the Adelsons, Jewish family that supported Trump. And that same Jewish family is trying to put a casino in our backyard here in Texas, turn DFW into a Las Vegas. Which,
stick around because we're going to dive into that
attracts
and show
all kinds of crime, all kinds of degenerates. It will over time, not year one, but over time, it will absolutely ruin our state.
Yeah.
You think the southern border?
And they'll get rich off of it too.
And
so our state will be ruined.
Yep.
We won't get rich off of that.
And so then you're like, well, what's going on here? How are they getting away with this? Well, part of the way you get away with it is you give $100 million to Trump.
That'll do it.
And sometimes when people are like, oh, well, I don't understand, is Trump going to cross the Rubicon, and like, I'm sitting here, trusting the plan. He's playing 4D chess. I've got the fell for it again badges, covering my entire body. I can barely see through my glasses. Fell for it again, fell for it again, fell for it again. Like Trump MAGA, the drool's coming out of your mouth. And it's like, hear me, I voted for Trump. I'm glad that he's president. But you also just have to be honest. Peter Thiel, Palantir, J.D. Vance, Trump getting $100 million from the Adelsons, who are also Jewish and putting a casino in DFW. Like, it's not looking great. Don't love it. Do not love it. And right now, to be honest, we're on track for, if these numbers continue, we're on track for 1 to 2 million deportations.
Generous.
In 4 years.
Yep.
And that's generous. Yeah. 1 to 2 million, which puts Trump at less than half than Obama. So I like Trump, okay? I do. But I'm going to be honest about Trump. And if Trump gets federal funding for IVF, which incarcerates children, that begins at conception, which is not implantation, but fertilization. That's a child made in the image of God. If he gets federal tax-funded dollars for IVF and is taking $100 million from this Jewish family that ruins my state and deports only 2 million people, and people are like, oh, there's so much winning. I can't take the winning. Wake up and enter into the real world. And those are the things we're going to talk about in this episode today. We need to be political beasts. And to do that, we need to have a Bible in our hand, but we also need to have preferably an IQ above 85 and think in real world dynamics, which involves strategy, It involves campaigns. It involves money. We need to get something done.
Yep.
Because the Calvary's not coming. We've got to do something.
I love this comment. So this is from Missouri Christians Against Abortion. They said, this is true. I spent a summer door knocking to remove our state senator in Missouri. And ultimately, so this is the state level. This isn't federal, but at the state level in Missouri. And it ultimately resulted in outlawing transgender mutilation for minors. How many Christians...
Knocking on doors, and he did that.
Yep. And how many Christians totally oppose it, but never were even thinking, oh, this is something that could happen in my state.
Right.
Oh, there's people that support it. Oh, they're running for office. Oh, I should donate. Oh, I should give my time.
Right.
You've got to start thinking local. Let me put some flesh on the bones here. Nate, you can pull up the second graphic.
Real quick, there was one more comment I got to shout out. Nathan, scroll up real quick. This comes from Dreamer, and he says, good afternoon, fellow real writers.
RIGHT, not
right.
writers.
The real right. I'd like to take credit for that one. I said the other day on Twitter, I said, I'm bullish on the real right.
Mm-hmm.
Woke right's not a thing, doesn't exist. If you want to hear my conclusive, once and for all, it should be done. I assume James Lindsay's currently right now, as we speak, in the fetal position, crying. But if you want to hear my once and for all takedown of the the joke of a term woke right, then you can see me on Elijah Schaefer's Slightly Offensive. And I took that deceptive joke of a term to task. Real right, we'll see. May not catch on, but at least one guy in the chat.
Our guy.
He's using it. Dreamer. God bless you.
Love it. All right, so let's pull up graphic 2 here. So I just want to show, we talk about state, talk about local. Look at the difference here in money. Look at the difference in the number of just positions that exist. And look at the just opportunity there is. So federal level, 1 president, 50 senators, 428 representatives. Guys, the Senate race costs $26 million. If you have $26 million, give me a call. Most of us don't have that, and it's hard to raise that amount of money. At the state level, though, well, instead of 50 senators, there's 50 slots at all this money, all these people, all this talent's competing for. Well, across the United States, you have around 1,900 state senators. Those races, they don't cost $26 million. They cost, on average, so the average for those who win, about $150,000. Raising that, that's a couple men who are lawyers and attorneys and doctors in your church. They really want to see you get into politics. That's a lot more doable. Same thing at the state representative level. About 5,500 state reps at that level. Your average winnings, that's $70,000. That's to get a campaign, that's to run ads, that's to get volunteers, that's to do all of those different things. And so your state level, same thing with local. You've got, obviously, mayor of Los Angeles is different than being mayor of Timbuktu. But you have a lot more opportunity right at this intermediate level. That you can go to the next graphic here. And I really think we're thinking localism. We're thinking Christian boroughs. We're thinking, where can I have the most impact? It's not federal. Now, don't think too small either. Well, I'm going to take over my HOA for Jesus. Well, praise God. And you probably could. And I'll even grant you, probably practically, as far as having an impact, if you could, for example, I don't know, like raise chickens, ban offensive yard signs, you could actually have a pretty quaint, well-manicured little neighborhood. You could be practically beneficial at a personal level, but you're always doing the trade-off. All right, this will be beneficial to me, but me and 5 other people. Now, banning abortion at the federal level, that would be awesome, and that would be beneficial to millions of people.
Right.
Practically impossible. At the national level, you guys have to understand, legislation is so gridlocked. It's just hard to pass anything. There's people that spend their entire career in politics. They're trying to just pass funding for interstates, this, that, or the other. Very, very difficult to do. Practically, down at the low level, yeah, you could definitely do tons of things that are local. They're not going to have much of an impact. You need to think county and you need to think state. And we're going to get into some actual case studies of exactly this happening. You talked about Dallas. We're going to talk about Colorado as well. But in your mindset, you need to know, who's my state senator in my district? Who's my state representative? Who's the mayor? Who's on city council for my district? Who's my sheriff? Who's this? Who's that or the other? Maybe you have to move. You're looking at it practically and you're like, every single person that represents me, they have none of my interests in mind. Now, you don't keep moving. It's not, well, I moved here and they're not perfect. He's not an abolitionist. We're out of Tennessee and we're off to Georgia. If you have to make the move, make it. But then the best way to win at those levels, you have to stay somewhere. Like, honestly, the people that I see, like, for example, in the Texas legislature, there are a lot of times people that have family ties to Texas for generations. They're not people that moved around. We actually have Valentina Gomez is her name. She's tried to win a number of different like House representative races. She actually just moved here to run for Texas House District 31. Nobody's going to vote for her She's all over the place. So you got to find somewhere. You got to say, I want to have an impact. Ideally, it's practically achievable that you could do that. And then you got to stick. I'm fighting for this county. I'm fighting for this district for 40 years, helping candidates, door knocking, donating, vetting people, encouraging, hey, you're awesome. You love the Lord. You have a great job that will support this. You need to get out there. You need to run for office. So start thinking not so local, you have no impact, not so high level that you would have impact, but you can't do it, but the county, state level. Anything add, Joel, before our first commercial break?
Let's go to our first commercial break and we'll be right back.
Our sponsor, Private Family Banking, wants to help you with one money move that'll implicate itself in multi-generational wealth building starting the first day. They help you to avoid taxation and to draw compound interest to your money. Now, if you're a high net worth individual, someone who has maybe even $10 million in net worth, then they can help you even more. W-2 workers, contract workers, business owners, it's all about cash flow and making tax-deferred gains on all your money for the rest of your life. Don't avoid this. It's a big move, but it's a great time to make it. Click the link below and you can get on Chuck DeLauderante's calendar and he'll go over your background and what you want to accomplish. And he's going to help model a program that exactly fits your needs. So go ahead and send an email to chuck@privatefamilybanking.com. Again, that's chuck@privatefamilybanking.com, or you can click the link below. Make a free discovery call now.
The danger of centralized power is often represented by the word king. As Americans, we hate the word king. Civilian ownership of body armor is about helping people to have increased power to resist tyrants and criminals. And so, Armored Republic is about helping you to preserve your God-given rights to the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, because he is the King of Kings, and he governs kings and he will judge them. This is Armored Republic, and in a republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen, and we are honored to be your armorsmith of choice.
All right.
All right.
So say you're all in. You say, I want to do this, and I want to get involved in politics. One of the big things you're going to have to do, and this is why we haven't talked about it a ton. We haven't talked about these local races. We haven't talked about what it looks, is because I can't actually tell you state to state what it actually looks like to get involved. So for example, Texas is one of the lowest paying state legislators. You make, it's like $6,000 to $7,000, and you're in session about 5 months, and then if there's special sessions for about 8 months. Now that's a full-time job. So that means you're getting paid $7,000 and you're working for 5 months for basically $1,200. It's not a career. And this is actually a barrier. Texas did it so that people don't kind of become career politicians. They have to be successful outside of politics. But if you think about a young man, he's got kids, he's like, awesome, I want to do something for the Lord. Well, here's the deal, young man. You have to be independently wealthy and able to do that. Now compare that to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania state legislator pays $106,000 a year. Well, all of a sudden you've gone from, I could do this as a career, I just have to win a race. You've jumped way over to, if you're in Pennsylvania, New York also pays a lot. If you win a race there, that could totally be your career. They're in session all year long. And so when it comes down to, I want to be involved, but where should I be involved? The deal is you have to begin to know your area. You have to know what they pay. You have to know how long legislators in session. You have to know city council. Every city council, every board of trustees position, every school board position across the United States, some of them have a stipend of $12,000. Some of them are full-time jobs. And so we can't personally hold people's hands through this. But here's the deal. People have got to start becoming aware. They have to start knowing these things. They have to start vetting people. They have to start saying, here's what it'll pay, and this person is able to do it. This person has the time, especially if you're thinking about men. You're 40 to about 50 years old. Hopefully you're successful in business. Hopefully you're successful in career. And that's the point to say, could I take a couple months off and run a campaign? Could I take the time and door knock and be okay? Well, actually, then I'm probably have a sense of duty to do it. Early on in our founding, it was often public office. It was viewed not as a privilege, but as a responsibility. That highly capable, oftentimes personally rich, Lord knows George Washington was not getting rich off being president, often high caliber, personally rich men, they felt it incumbent upon them I have to run for office. I have to do something. I have the resources, other men don't. I have the money, other men don't. I have the skills, I have the conviction, I have the passions, other men don't. And so what you need to do, if you're listening to this, I want to get involved, I want to do this. You've got to begin understanding, what does my state's composition look like? What does my county composition look like? What does my town, my city council, what does that composition look like? Anything to add?
No.
All right. Let's talk about dark money.
All right.
So when it comes down to it, we mentioned about $16 billion is typically put into races like this. If you're not familiar with the nonprofit type of world, there's a whole world of different type of nonprofits that have varying levels of disclosure. So 501c3, for example, those you have to disclose, I think it's about $5,000, who your donors are. But there's a class that's called 501c4s. These would be social, I think the word is social welfare organizations. Nate, you can pull up this image and we'll just keep it up for a minute so people are able to see it. These social welfare institutions, they have a lot of money.
APAC.
Have you heard of them before?
I have heard of them. Gosh, I had never seen their logo until right now. Thanks. I hate it. The American flag and a Jewish star?
The Star of Rephaim?
That is just disgusting.
Don't
Is
don't
that
love
for
it.
real? Or is that like...
No, that's the APAC logo.
That's
and
their
APAC
logo.
is a 501c4. So I have on the screen here, I have an example of these organizations. APAC, Planned Parenthood is another one. The
Hate
NRA. Now, how this works is Planned Parenthood doesn't make money. Lord knows they're so wicked, they're happy to give you scholarships and pay for you to get their services. So it's like, well, how does Planned Parenthood make their money? Well, wealthy donors that have an agenda to push. So APAC, for example, is founded by none other, in part, the owner of OnlyFans, who is also Jewish.
Yep.
So you have someone that's very interested in the things APAC is pushing. Well,
So
I
you're telling
like
me
this
that
mission.
There's similarity. There's like a common thread running through APAC and Planned
Just woven
Parenthood
through.
and OnlyFans. No way. Shocker. You're telling me this for the first time.
You're telling me this for the first time.
All right.
But you have donors, and think of a George Soros, for instance. George Soros does not roll up and write a personal check to a campaign with George Soros Foundation on the top. Someone goes and cashes it in. They get to use the money for whatever they want. But this dark money, and I'll get to why this matters in a minute, is profoundly impactful on you trying to pursue political ends. So these social welfare organizations, APAC, Planned Parenthood, the NRA is one of them, for instance, they don't have to disclose where their money comes from. So this is a quote from an online resource. Politically active nonprofits, such as a 501c4, are generally under no legal obligation to disclose their donors, even if they spend influence elections. And so you have millions and millions and millions of dollars. We don't know where it comes from. At least they don't have to legally disclose. These are who are giving me money. We talked about the Adelsons. This would be an example of the way they do it. They don't have to disclose, and they fund these big conglomerates. So then APAC gets on the ground, and they look at a candidate, or they look at a proposition, and they say, do I support it, or do I oppose it? Say they support a candidate. Well, they often use what are called in-kind contributions. So say APAC comes in, all things said and done, maybe they do it. Most likely they probably don't. They don't write you a check for $200,000. Right? Here's $200,000. We trust you use it well. If you don't, no harm, no foul. But what they'll donate is social media help, graphic help, volunteer time. So they'll pay people that are volunteering on your behalf. They'll also run attack ads on your components. So you have this money that nobody knows where it comes from. It's hitting APAC's coffers. They find a guy and he's like, I like the senator from Florida who literally has an Israeli flag in his office.
Right.
They find a guy like that. Oh, the race is tight. I don't know. We're polling 50-50. They come in. Again, they're not writing personal checks necessarily to his campaign. But what they are doing is they're going in, they're attacking your opponent. They're putting volunteers on the ground. You say, hey, I need help with these ads. I need this, that, or the other. Now, there's not necessarily sometimes collaboration, so they'll keep distance. But they have their interest. Same thing with Planned Parenthood. Say they oppose you. You run for office. You make it clear, no, I think abortion should be illegal. Life starts at conception. Well, Planned Parenthood could roll in and say, we've got a guy that he's going to do this. He's going to do that. He's going to do other. And they're going to go to his political opponent. All right, well, so we're here in the primary, and we think this person has the best chance to take him down. So let's go ahead. Let's run attack ads on all of the other opponents. Let's go ahead and do lobbying. Let's go ahead and make all these contributions of resources and everything like that. And you guys have to understand, like, that's how city council races are manipulated. That's how House representative races are manipulated. Like, AIPAC puts a lot of money into helping candidates that they want to win and making sure the candidates they don't like lose. That's how that money flows. And to that point, there is a tactical incentive. So you know all of this. There is a tactical incentive to not drawing that type of opposition. That if you can fly under the radar, you actually have a better chance.
Yeah.
Now, if you've done it, right? They go back, they find the tweets. Well, hey, stand your ground. But there's something really to be said for example, on the positive side of things. Here in Texas, we have the Dunn brothers, big time oil billionaires. They have been politically active. They put money into people's campaigns. They fund conservative causes, all this, that, or the other. It's better to, it's kind of called sometimes like hide your power levels. It's better sometimes to hold back a little bit and get $150,000 in support from the Dunns and win your race than to run, to be all up front, to attract tons of attention, make donors like that wouldn't like all of your views. I'm not really going to support that guy. Seems like a bit of a loose cannon. It's better sometimes because you got to be thinking long term. Well, I stood on my principles and I lost. Yeah, but how much better would it have been if you won?
Yeah, right.
Like there's, we lost it, but I was out there and I was principled. Yeah, but you fell short by just a couple hundred votes, and you could have probably made that. Not even if you changed your views. So I'm not talking about compromising. I'm not talking about you're sitting there in the interview and it's like, well, do you believe in abortion? And you're just like, well, I got to win this race. And yes, I do. You know, on demand, anytime, anywhere. Of course not. But practically speaking, like just really practically, there's not a lot of reform theonomists out there bankrolling theonomists going into politics. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of conservatives with billions of dollars bankrolling conservative candidates. Mm-hmm. Those exist. Anything to add on that?
No, that's wise. Politicians have it on good authority that politicians sometimes lie.
Believe it or not.
Believe it or not. And that gets into a broader topic of, but it is actually, it is a theological category. A lot of guys, plenty of debate. I'm not saying it's settled and just, black and white, but there is actually a debate to be had, like, did Rahab sin in terms of, all of a sudden the guards in Jericho are knocking on her door,
Right.
Have you seen the Israeli spies?
Yeah.
Do you know where they are? And she's like, oh, they went that way, and meanwhile they're hidden in her living space. Or the Midianite, the Egyptian midwives. The Egyptian midwives, who say, oh, well, the Hebrew women, they're strong women and they just end up giving birth before we get there, But it's because they feared God. And so they defied and were willing to be intentionally deceitful towards Pharaoh, So there actually is a biblical principle for, they call it, Sproul actually did, I think, a whole sermon on this, the lie of necessity. The lie of necessity. And in this particular case, there are degrees of deception. So there's outright, blatant lying, but then there's also simply not divulging, not volunteering certain details of the truth. So there's a difference in being sat down on national television and being asked, when do you believe, human life begins? And just outright lying versus you just playing certain cards close to the chest during the campaigning season so that you can get the buku bucks from the nominally conservative, donors and win your race. And then once you've won and established that victory, then come out swinging, hiding your power level. So there really is something to be said for this, like even in the art of war, even within, the ramifications of just war theory, so it's like, it is a just war. So are we lying in a category that would actually be categorically sin by having, our platoons dressed in camouflage? I mean, what is camouflage other than an entire uniform that says, I'm not here? It's like, but you are here.
Right.
And you're communicating, you're conveying by your apparel that you're not somewhere when you are, right? Which is a lie. But again, so thinking through those things theologically, carefully, and strategically, and finding a way ethically right? There are certain barriers where it's like, all right, well, you can't do that. That really is just categorically a sin. But there is a way of being, innocent as doves and as shrewd as vipers. And Christians do need to develop, I think, a godly sense of shrewdness. I think that sadly there are many times that we are innocent as doves and also as shrewd as doves, and that's a failure.
Yeah. There was a conservative candidate, so city council races are typically not partisan. So if I go to vote for city council, it's not going to say Republican or Democrat because those are local. Those aren't involved at the state level. But there was a city council member here in Georgetown, and he was really pretty conservative. But when it came to winning the district, he's like, if I go door to door and I try to get this small group of a couple thousand people to vote for me or this, that, or the other, and I lead off with these issues, they're ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of them will be turned off. They won't be motivated to come out. But he said, here's what I can do. I can make my campaign about preservation of historic Georgetown. We have a beautiful town square with lots of historic buildings. And so he's conservative and he agrees with all the things that we talked about. But he said, you know what? I don't have to lead off with those. They're still true. I still hold them to your point. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go door to door and I'm going to knock on doors. I'm going to say, hey, I'm really interested in keeping Georgetown, keeping its historic structure, keeping all the things that make it the town that we love. Perfectly permissible for a Christian to do.
Yeah, you get to decide what you're going to emphasize. That's different. Being strategic on what you emphasize and what you choose strategically not to emphasize is not the same as categorically lying.
Exactly. And if you're in upstate New York, you want to win an election, probably don't lead off with Christ is King. Is he king? Yes. And here's the deal. Once you get in office...
But why in upstate New York, Wes?
Why particularly?
Why not leading with Christ as King in that particular area? No.
I just believe it or not. Someone had a good comment here. Once again, Missouri Christians against abortion. They said this, a lot of times money doesn't even matter in local races. The state senator we removed outspent us 10-1. If you have a group of hardworking, dedicated Christians, you can move mountains. Absolutely,
yeah, that's
true.
absolutely true. And when Wes is talking about money, it's just it's one or the other. When he says money, it's good to put it, I think, in those terms, in those categories, just to be thinking that on average, ordinarily, right? So sometimes God does something extraordinary, but ordinarily, you win with volunteers. That's true. But ordinarily, it takes capital to get those volunteers, right? So it's like, hey, if we can have these many people knocking on doors, then we can do it for free. But ordinarily, it costs money to get that many people who are knocking on doors and running some ads and things like that. Real quick, I just wanted to draw attention to a super chat that we got because we always want to prioritize the guys who are generously giving to this ministry. We appreciate it. This is from the Salty Sailor. He gave us $20 super chat. Thank you. He said, GA, good afternoon. New to the fight, got slapped across the face by Isker on Tucker Carlson, and it's been a wild ride for this non-denominational Baptist whose theology has been thoroughly rocked. I'm here for all of it. Is there a Discord
to
organize local real writers? That's a great question. I'm not aware of one. Probably should be one.
I'm going to get to how to organize here in the third segment, but really appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, thank you.
The great question of how do I connect with people that are like me?
Yeah.
Just another example to because it's really helpful, I think, to see it on the ground. A great example would be the Christian Prince himself, minor level, Dusty Devers. So his campaign race, he was running in one of the reddest state in the United States, which is Oklahoma.
Yep.
And he was running in the reddest district inside of Oklahoma. And the reason he was even running in the first place, just as a general principle, if you have an incumbent, that is somebody who's already in office and they're really popular,
they're going to win.
It's hard to get them out.
Yeah.
But in his case, the state senator who was there for his district had actually left to be appointed to another position. So he had what's called an open primary. And an open primary is a really great way to distinguish yourself. So instead of needing and requiring to get as much name recognition as the guy that's already in office, who's had 10 years to do it, in an open primary, it's however many people decide to show up and compete. Typically, there's a runoff between the top two. So he wasn't competing against an incumbent. He was competing in an open primary, and his campaign was not well funded. It was definitely outspent. I'll get to that in a minute. But what he did have was a church that door knocked for him every day, every week, for months on end. You need something like that. Some type of, do I have capital maybe? Do I have volunteers? Do I have a church?
And in Dusty Devers' case, he also did
a network.
He also did get capital. So he had a network, he had a local church, and all those people were volunteering, night and day, giving all their spare time. People were taking off of work. Yeah, praise God. But even in Dusty's case, with all the free volunteers that rallied to his aid, he still got an infusion of not much, but some capital from Christians.
Yep. Well, and then what happened though, and to the point about, well, you can be outspent. You absolutely can. And I would say momentum is on our side. But during, I think it was college football, it might have been the state championships there around like Oklahoma or around October, November. He was literally running for office and he would see a huge, I mean, these cost $500,000. We don't know where the money came from. He said, I had attack ads to me on college NCAA football. I'm watching football and here come attack ads at me. I don't know what they're for. I don't know why. Said that? Dusty said that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of dark money.
Probably from Bart Barber.
Well, they'd have to be rich in the first place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But those are the types of dynamics. Now, he did a great job. He had conviction. He had the resources. He had the capital infusion, and he made it happen. But those are the type of dynamics. I mean, that ruins people's races. You're doing good. You're doing good. Someone gets wind of it. They roll in. They push some cash in, and you don't stand a chance. Everybody that was watching football that weekend, which in the South, I mean, 98% of people,
right?
98% of people just heard the best angle they would have to attack you. That's tough to overcome. So those are some of the dynamics at play.
Right.
All right, we'll hit our last commercial break and be right back.
Are you a Christian struggling to find companies that align with your values and beliefs? Well, then Squirrely Joe's has you covered for all your coffee needs. All of their coffee is hand-selected and roasted fresh every day by a family of fellow believers. Try them out and you'll savor exceptional coffee while knowing that your investment supports a company committed to following God's teachings and upholding truth and righteousness, ensuring that your hard-earned money contributes to the growth of God's kingdom. Stop giving your hard-earned dollars to pagans who support evil. Right Response listeners have access to an exclusive deal. Your first bag of coffee is free. All you have to do is cover the shipping. So head on over to squirrelyjoes.com/right response. Again, that's squirrelyjoes.com/right response to claim your first free bag of coffee today.
All right.
Real quick, couple super chats. Jeff Hafley, he gave us $5. Thanks, Jeff. He said, in a small state, you can run for office at the state legislative level with $25,000 and a whole lot of elbow grease running door to door. That's probably true.
Yep.
But what he's recognizing is, in that case, it still takes capital, $25,000, and a lot of, like what we described with Dusty, a lot of guys who are volunteering their time, working hard, going door to door, and trying to get it done. And then Guy gave us a super chat for $10. Thanks, Guy. He said, there's a group of LGBT activists led by a gay Episcopalian priest, many such cases, holding a pride event in our small rural Pennsylvania town this June. The men of our church are organizing to oppose it. Any advice?
So I'm from Pennsylvania, and so the laws there are generally not favorable. So the politics of Pennsylvania is that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia on the other end typically influence a lot of the state politics. So even though a lot of the people, like he's saying right now, it's a small town, they're pretty rural, they're pretty conservative. The politics of the state are not favorable. And I say that because if there was a state law, and I would still look at them, I would look at your state's obscenity laws. If there's a state obscenity law that would be thought to perhaps put the kibosh on something like this, then I would use that. I would get involved with your local sheriff, your mayor, and city council to go ahead and say, hey, the state law on the books in Pennsylvania prohibits, displays of overt sexuality in public. This event looks like it would do that. And what you can do is you can simply put pressure on them. Will the mayor see it the same way that, this would definitely violate it? Maybe, maybe not. But what helps him see it that way? Dozens and dozens of emails from individuals saying by state law, this is not permissible. There's legal penalties, there's legal fines, all of these things. So that's one way you can attack it with the law. But here's the problem with this, without necessarily knowing anything about the town, this, that, or the other. When the work hasn't been done leading up to something, it's very hard to then, at the moment, the pride parade's coming to town, the event's happening here, this, that, or the other. It's very hard in that time because you're up against all of the pieces that were put in place leading up to it. So a great help here and a great way to shut it down would be a city council that wouldn't approve the permit. Well, but most of my city council is woke and they're gay. And, well, exactly. And that's the problem. That's where we're not just thinking like right now, I may be able to shut this down or able to shut that down. You need to be thinking years in advance. Who's running for city council in 2 years? Is it one of our guys? Because this will come up again and again and again. And practically speaking, long term, obviously there's the cultural stuff out there, but literally on the ground, Well, they need a permit to do this parade. They need a permit to do this event. They need a permit to do this type of pride thing. Well, what would really help is if you had a city council, say it's of 6 members or 8 members, and 4 of them, would shut it down. Well, boom, then you've solved the problem. But what it requires is you got to be thinking ahead. And so even here in Texas, we've had some of that. I can commiserate with the difficulty of, well, that doesn't help me because we're not 2 years ago, we're now. But that's why we had to begin thinking about what are we putting in place now that as these things come back to town, we might not be able to stop it now, but we can do. Now, certainly you can, if it does happen, you can preach, you can pray, you can play music, you can sing, you can rally other churches. I'll get to the importance of that in a minute. But also, it's going to be coming around each year. And it's time to get some guys up in city council that would say, hell no, we're not having that in our town.
One follow-up from Jeff Halfley, another $5 super chat. Thanks, Jeff. He says, Dusty Devers had a respected family name, tons of door knockers, and a Christian right-wing family that were angel investors. So all this is helpful, just giving an idea of what it takes.
Yep.
So it sounds like, his name, and I know Dusty personally, but his name was known in the town, in that district. People knew who he was, knew his family. They'd lived there for a long time, been there, long standing. Tons of door knockers. That was primarily people in his church, but all of them volunteering dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. And on top of it, still couldn't get away with just name and volunteers alone. An infusion of capital from a right-wing family that were angel investors. Then he followed up one more time, Jeff Halfley, saying Devers was also a pastor, which gave him a certain amount of insulation and respect. Yes, and I would like to iterate on that point in the context of the reddest district of the reddest state in America.
And he only won by 400 votes. So
Right.
he had all of those things in his favor.
In that context.
And in the reddest district.
The reddest district of the reddest state in America, with a infusion of capital from an angel investor, with an entire church volunteering dozens and dozens and dozens of their hours and time, and also with a name that had been in that area, the Devers, living in that area for a very long time, recognizing
A business
the name.
with his name in it, a personal property business.
That's right.
Yep.
And with him also being a pastor in a place where that actually would mean something positive.
Right.
Right. So it's like, hey, he's a pastor. That'll help him out, in San Francisco, California. No, it will not. But in that context, and all that put him over the edge for a state senator position by a 400 voter margin.
Yep.
And so it's just important to be aware of what it costs, right? I'm just reminded of the scripture, that no one builds a tower without first counting the costs. Otherwise, he'll get halfway through the project and then have to count his losses and be done, and everybody will mock him along the way. Or if you're going to war, with an army of 10,000 against, somebody who's, a general or a king that has 20,000, then you're going to go and send ambassadors to treaty for peace. Because you can't win. You don't have what it takes. And so it's important for Christians to do this, but it's also for Christians preemptively to count the cost and to recognize this is what it's going to take to win. And I also think that it's important to consider where it's actually possible to win, which is part of the reason why I wrote this book, Fight by Flight, realizing that, if I could sum it up in just a sentence, I would say that the evangelical church for the last 50 years, instead of winning somewhere, we opted for losing everywhere. I'll say that again. Instead of strategically and deliberately choosing over the long haul to balkanize, centralize, and win somewhere, we opted for losing everywhere. We lost overseas, right? In the same way that the evangelical church has just followed America's politics to the T. We have not been leading the way. We've just been copying and doing everything 5 to 10 years behind the 8 ball. So America's, time to export some democracy. We just found oil, in the Middle East. And so we go over there, and then, 20 years later, we're leaving billions of dollars of machinery and equipment and ammunition, and all of it being picked up by countries like Iran, then putting pressure on Israel, and then all of a sudden having Trump, who's supported by $100 million by the Adelson's family, and then, your lucky son, or God forbid, in some cases, daughter, gets to go and bleed out and die for Israel. Right? These things matter. These are real things. That is actually the sequence. And we've had the same strategy. My point in bringing that up is we've had the same strategy even as Christians when it comes to global missions. We go into some country to export the gospel. We don't actually count the cost, right? We're not really sending people that are qualified. And then when we get there on the ground, they're not really actually supported. They don't have the injection. They don't have the financial support. They don't have the team that they need. And nothing really happens. And then we've done the same thing locally. Like, we're going to plant churches, and we're going to plant them everywhere. And we're going to plant thousands and thousands and thousands of churches. And we're going to plant them, in Manhattan. And we're going to plant them.
We will fight in the beaches. We will fight in the air. We will plant them everywhere.
We will plant them everywhere, right? We're going to plant them in Manhattan. We're going to plant them in San Francisco. We're going to plant them in
There's a middle school. We're planting
DC.
one that meets there.
That's right. And we're even going to opt for the the bluest, most libtard districts that you could possibly imagine. And 5 years later, 150 grand is spent. And everybody's, dispersed, and there's no church there to speak of. And so we've done this again and again and again. And so we need to know, we need to be involved in politics. We need to win, right? And not just say, oh, well, we gave it our darndest, and my conscience is clear before the Lord. It'd be nice to actually win. It'd be nice to win. And so, so knowing what it takes up front, what is the cost, so that we don't build half of a tower and then abandon the project,
right?
So that we're not making, treaties for peace with somebody who's got twice our army, and we're embarrassed, and then we have to turn around, tuck our tail between our legs and run away. We'd like to go out, we'd like to be involved, but we'd like to be successful. And if so, you need to count the cost. What does it take to win? But also, where can we win? And that's the whole point of, the fight by flight. It's not to speak of cowardice. It's not saying, hey, you know what, we can't win, so therefore we just quit. No, it's we can't win here today, right now, but we can win over there right now. And so we're going to bring in reinforcements. We're going to fall back so that we can actually balkanize and accumulate greater forces in an area where we actually can win. So we're going to win here. We're going to fortify. We're going to tamp down and then expand our victory out. Once we've got this locked down, this district, we're going to go over and try to win the next. But to do that, you have to think long term. You have to think strategically, and it can't just be a purity spiral, right? It can't just be grandstanding. It actually has to be people who are shrewd and resolute and deliberate, that they actually want to win.
Yep, absolutely. Like, for example, so all of that calculus, well, Devers had family and a job and a church. Like, say you're a young man, you're hearing this episode and you're like, I love it. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and I'm going to go run for this. Well, my brother in Christ, do you have a family that's able to help you? Generations there. Well, no. Do you have a church that would get involved? Well, no, my church is kind of non-denominational. They're pretty squishy. Okay. Do you have wealth personally? Well, no, I don't. Do you have a name in the community? No, I don't. Do you have people that would at least invest? No, I don't. You're not going to win. You are going to waste. And I've seen it. I've seen here in Texas, like, oh, we want to take this district that's blue and turn it red. And they'll spend hundreds of man hours and thousands of dollars. And they barely moved the percentage vote, maybe 5%. We don't have the luxury of wasting our time. And so you need to practically and ruthlessly, if you're thinking about office, do I have an actual shot at doing this? You can do it. You have those different things in place, maybe this side or the other. There are factors, but be honest, do those apply to me? Because if not, I need to build a business so that in 10 years, I do have an actual shot.
That's right.
Much better to build a business and actually win in 10 years than to run every 2 years and lose all of those, end up at 10 years, still no slot, still no business.
I'm glad you said that, Wes, because a lot of the young men who are listening to us right now, they need to hear that. They need to be aware that the advice that we're giving right now is not advice that they need to go out and pursue today. What they actually need to do is they need to get married, they need to have kids, they need to start a business, they need to be successful, and they need to be rich. And they need to do that, and it's going to take them 10 years to accomplish that. And then once they're at that point, then they need to run or throw in their weight and their support with somebody else who's going to run. But it's going to take a team. It's not just some guy in isolation living behind enemy lines alone that's going to win some political race in Seattle that hates Christ. That's not going to happen. And so instead of trying to win everywhere, but ultimately losing everywhere, we need to actually consolidate and deliberately fall back behind certain lines and choose to help someone else. Like for a lot of you, you're not going to be the guy. Not today. Eventually you might be, but not today. Today, the best thing you can do is simply identify who is the guy and then fall in line and help him. Maybe you're a volunteer lead who's going, every Saturday for the next 3 months is going to lead a team of volunteers and go door knocking on every neighborhood, within this, this area. And that's great, but there are guys who are doing this, and they need support. They need donations. They need volunteers. But that's what you need to do. You need to identify who's the guy, and it's probably not you, right? It's not going to be everybody listening to this. That's just the old adage of like, if everybody, you're called to be a leader, and you're called to be a leader, and no, you're not. You're not. If everybody was a leader, then nobody's a leader, right? The whole concept of leadership is that there are fewer leaders than there are followers. Everybody, by the grace of God, if you're a Christian man, you should be able to lead yourself, and you should be able to lead a wife and a family. But not everybody's going to be a pastor, and not everybody's going to be a politician. Not everyone is going to lead in the ecclesiastical sphere or the civil sphere. That's going to be a minority. That's just the nature of leadership. There are fewer leaders than there are followers. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify who is the Lord already using? Who's got the best chance? Who has the most expertise? Someone who didn't just show up yesterday. They've been in an area. So we need to identify men, and we need to identify places, people and places. What is a place that actually could be won? It's feasible. Okay, now who's already living in that place and has reputation, long-standing presence in that place, who has some expertise, who has some political savvy, who has some capital, some money, and how can I come alongside him and see to it that he actually is able to secure a victory?
Exactly.
But that was the problem with like the church planting movement, is everybody wanted to be a church planter. And so a bunch of guys, including myself, end up biting off more than they can chew and get wrecked, and in politics, it's the same thing. People go out, they get wrecked. So identifying fertile places, high caliber men, and how can I help?
And how can you help? That's the last piece that I want to add to it. It was Salty Sailor. He asked, how do I find people? And that's an excellent question. So it could be like, I believe this. And I mean, looking at the statistics, if within your mile radius, honestly, there's probably 50 guys who think the same thing. They love Jesus. And maybe some of this is Protestants and Catholics, but in a given area between Protestants, Catholics, you've probably got dozens, maybe even a couple hundred. They're young men, they're starting businesses, they have families, they go to church, and they want to be politically active. But here's the problem. How do I find them? For one, you need to network. Make time once a year. It doesn't have to be ours. Go to a conference, because what there's going to be at a conference is a bunch of people with name tags, and some of those name tags will say the same town, or at the very least the same state that you're from. So you have to network. Using social media is another great way to do it. Hey, I love this guy. He's in North Carolina. He's in Georgia. He's in Oklahoma. And actually, I don't live that far away from him. And I can help him when it comes time to run for re-election. So you need to network. But here's what you also need too. And this is what I'm seeing is actually creating the networks. You need a crisis. You need something that then brings the men like, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like this. And then it actually brings them together, and they realize, well, we're all together now. We just beat this thing we don't like. Well, hang on, we could actually do something. One of our guys, he could run for office. We could vote for him. And I want to give the example. We've talked about it a little bit already, but in Dallas, this just happened. This is not like years ago, like literally right here on the ground. The Adelson family is the owner of a hugely profitable casino that is mostly based in Las Vegas. This would be Sands. I think it's Resort and Casino. That might be the name of it. But it's billions and billions of dollars, and it's a cash cow. And then you have Texas. Texas doesn't have any casinos right now. There would need to be approval at the local level and the state level. But imagine if you had one of the first casinos in Texas, and it was huge and it was big, and say you positioned it between the two airports that are right there in Dallas, Fort Worth and Dallas. So you had a massive city with millions of people. You had airports that people could fly in. You could join it to, like, say, a sports teams like the Dallas Mavericks, who were recently bought by the Adelsons. So you could join it to a sports team. You could make billions and billions and billions of dollars. Now, here's the thing. You have to get city council. So what I'm talking about was what they are attempting to do in Irvine. I almost said Irvine, California. Irvine, Texas. Irving, Texas is right there. It's between Fort Worth and Dallas. There's a bunch of land, I think, that they have bought there, and they want to bring a casino in. But here's the deal. Practically speaking, we talked about dark money. We talked about being on the ground. They have to actually get approved for rezoning, as well as the state legislator has to actually approve Texas to be able to have casinos. I'm going to read from Dallas Express to just kind of get a sense of the dynamic, and I'll talk about how this kind of brought people together. The Dallas Express, a mysterious organization with ties to the Las Vegas Sands Corporation, appears to want to influence the outcome of Irving's city council race. A series of signs have popped up in Irving supporting the candidacy of city council candidates David Paff, Tony Grimes, and Priscilla Vigilante. Each sign is a disclosure paid for by the Lone Star Conservative Action Fund. That sounds pretty conservative. Lone Star Conservative Action, by the Lone Star Conservative Action Fund at the bottom. Similar text messages for each candidate have been sent to Irving residents with the same disclosure. So they're blasting out texts to people that live in the area, telling them who to vote for. The organization is a 501c4, so its donor lists are unavailable to the public. However, the executive director listed on the Forms 990 is Aaron DeLeon, owner and president of Leon Strategies. The ex-account Leon Strategies only follows 3 profiles, with the Texas Destination Resort Alliance being one. The Pro Casino Texas Destination Resort Alliance follows his ex-account. They received $25,000 from Sands-backed Texas for Opportunity and Prosperity Pact. Little is known about the fund beyond its donations. The organization's website espouses general support for law and order and low taxes, although it does not share any specific policies that achieve these ends. Likewise, the fund's newsletter appears to only have one entry, which went out over 3 months ago. Neither the newsletter nor the X account appear to have existed before January of this year. And so practically speaking, you have a beautiful town, you have a lot of people that live there, lots of families, and this big group worth billions and billions of dollars, they're coming in and they're trying to buy an election. Now, the thing that stopped it from happening was there's a city council member who read the fine print. This gets back to my point earlier. You have to actually have been at work for years in order to have a chance. You can't wake up tomorrow and stop something if you don't have anyone in office, you don't have any capital. But there's a great guy in the city council, and he read the little footnote that said when they were voting on rezoning. And he blew it up. He said, hey, do the residents actually want this? Hundreds of people came out, nearly all of them spoke against the casino. And now they're fighting for the city council race. I think it's called the Anti-Predatory Gambling Association. So that's their political action committee if you're in that area and you're interested in the fight. But here's the deal. It brought tons of guys together that didn't know each other. Maybe they listened to this show or another show, but they said, there's a casino coming in, and I want to meet other people that don't want it either. Mm-hmm. I want to get active. I don't want this in my backyard. And so practically speaking, the Pride Parade's a great example. Hey, we don't all have to agree. We don't all have to go to the same church. We don't all have to be this, that, or the other. But you know what we do agree on? You know what we can start from? Here's the foundation. We don't want a Pride Parade in our town.
Yep.
Another great example, this is just in Colorado. This is happening as we speak.
Yep.
House Bill 1312. House Bill 1312 is a bill that categorizes, among other things, misgendering. So this would be, calling your child. They say, Dad, I'm a girl and I'm really a boy. Calling them a boy as coercive abuse. And that coercive abuse, if this bill passed, could then be used as justification to take children away from the parents. So
right.
The title of this episode is Free Speech in Casinos. But on the ground, a bunch of guys, Chase Davis being one of them, got a bunch of pastors together.
J.J. Day?
J.J. Day, the guy out there in Boulder, Colorado. Now, he didn't do it all across the nation. So it was not, I don't care if you're in Washington. I don't care if you're in Montana. I don't care if you're in Texas. You have to come here. But what he did rally is local pastors.
That's right.
Pastors, Christians, you need to be speaking out about this. This is a bill in our state that could have terrible consequences. They rallied on the front steps of the Capitol. This Wednesday, if you're in Colorado, you're near the state Capitol, they're rallying again as the bill is heard in committee. And it's likely, and I hope by God's grace, the bill will die. Now,
right.
Did it die only from that action? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it's those type of things.
It helps.
And now you have a network of 15 to 20 pastors. They're not all in the same denomination,
right.
Sure. But they say, man, this is, I didn't like this. Now we've got each other's phone numbers. Let's see who runs a session from now.
Yep.
Let's see who we could support. Those are the type of things you have to be looking out for. You need to network, but you also need to look for that crisis and use that crisis to build a team and say, this is what we're going to be opposed for. This is what we're going to do. Not at the national level, not at the HOA level, the county, the state level.
Right.
This is what we want to accomplish.
Well said. Yeah, that's really helpful. Find a crisis and use that to rally with other like-minded people and raise a bulwark, a defense against it. This is from Ben. He gave us a $5 super chat. Thanks, Ben. He said, Adelson, you say, surely they don't wear small hats. They do.
They very much
They absolutely do. What is our topic for Wednesday?
That would have to be asked. Hopefully Michael's feeling better.
Okay,
That'll
so
be up
that's
to
his
Michael.
show. All right, Michael Belch. I'm just going to trust in good faith. It's going to be a good one. And then any plans yet for Friday, or kind of waiting to see if there's something in the news?
I mean, you got Pakistan and India.
Right.
Whatever way that goes, we're taking 100 million refugees. Like so-and-so attacked so-and-so.
Yeah, we better not be.
The details don't matter. We're getting refugees.
Yeah, we better not be.
You're getting enriched. You're getting diversity. But it seems pretty close to war. Like there's been terrorist incursions. I haven't paid close enough attention because I'm not Indian and I'm not Pakistani. But there's been terrorist attacks, incursions, threats across both sides. Hopefully, by God's grace, that's saber rattling. And then same thing in India, Israel, and Iran. Israel wants the U.S. on their side. They want to go to war. All the stuff about nukes, and so we'll see. We could have World War III on Friday, and we would have something to talk about.
Oh my goodness! Let's pray that that's not the case. But it would be great. Maybe for Friday we can try to put some stuff together, do some research, and address some geopolitical issues that are going on. Because that's. There's a lot going on, and we need to be aware of it. I was thinking, you mentioned India, and I was just thinking about the H-1B, visas and all that kind of stuff. And part of the difficulty at this point is per capita. America has more geniuses and higher caliber men than India does. India's a big country, 1.3 billion potential Americans live in India. They're not even Indians, right? Every other country of the world, there are Americans and there are potential Americans, right? That's all other countries are. They're just places, filled with potential Americans. But 1.3 billion potential Americans that live in India. But the problem is over decades of, the blessings of diversity. We've taken the best and brightest from all these other nations and hamstrung them in many ways to where they become perpetually dependent on America and foreign intervention from us and help and tax, our tax dollars and all in aid and all these kinds of things. And then also because we've taken the best, even with the meritocracy, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Maybe we could eventually do an episode, but this is where it gets into all the ridiculous accusations about the woke right. But what do you do if your country for 50 years, since the 1970s, has betrayed its own native populace by importing by the millions the best and brightest from India and every other nation for that matter, from China, from this place, from that place. And so you've crippled these other nations to where they're now dependent on you, that your citizens are used as a tax farm to prop them up. But because you've taken the best away from those nations, but by taking the best away, you've flooded your own nation over the course of 5 decades with a surplus of Indian geniuses, and Chinese geniuses and this and that and the other. And then, all of a sudden, your native population, predominantly, especially, young white conservative men, have woken up to the strategy that's been played on them before they were even born and are starting to speak out against it and saying, hey, I don't like that. I can't own a home. I'll never be able to have a single income family. My wife will never be able to stay home. We won't ever be able to have kids. If we do have kids, we can't afford to teach them because we're dependent on 2 incomes. And so they're going to end up having to go to public school and be indoctrinated to hate their parents, and believing, from the time that they're 7 years old that they're a gay furry, or whatever. And they're realizing this, and naturally, they're angry about it, and they start to speak out against it, and then the conservatives, we're putting the woke away. We'll put the woke away wherever we see it, woke on the left and woke on the right, and and they say, well, the solution is not to be woke in either direction. We don't want to be woke against white people. We don't want to be woke for white people. We don't want to be woke, and so it's just a meritocracy, and you're just going to have to compete. But then the jobs that they have to compete for are literally with 8.2 billion people on the planet for half of a century. We have extracted literally the highest IQ, highest caliber, most gifted, most utterly unique, 1 in a million people from every country in the world for half a century, for 50 years, and brought them here. So, hey, we're just, what do you want? We're conservatives. Don't you want to be a conservative, you young right-winger man? Don't be woke. Don't give in to the Marxist dialectic. Just be a conservative. And you can get that job. You just got to earn it on a meritocracy. Well, who do I compete with?
Oh, well, just the top 0.001% most brilliant, gifted people of all time out of 8 billion all over the planet because we moved them here.
Should be easy.
An episode on that, I think, could be really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired. Like, seriously, I am angry. I am livid at this. That's just woke right. No, there are Native Americans who don't stand a chance. Their country has been ruined.
Right.
And you don't fix it. You're not going to be able to fix it by just saying, okay, well, now that we've stacked the deck for 50 years against you, you caught me.
Oh.
You caught me being a communist for 50 years before you were even born. But now I see the error of my ways, and I'm going to change my ways. And so now that I've rigged the deck entirely against you from before you were born for 50 years, I'm now going to repent. And what am I going to do to fix it? Now I'm just going to say, well, let's just let the best man win. And they don't.
You got this, champ.
And they don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
And we think that's conservative? With conservatives like these, who needs communists?
Well, I'll give a human side to it. I'll keep the details very vague, but someone reached out and they said they work with a lot of individuals from India. And it was a team icebreaker, and it was basically, like, where would you want to vacation, or where would you want to be? And so many of them said, I would want to go home. I would want to see where my family's from. Like, they're here and they're working in whatever industry it is. And it's like, well, that's great. The American dream, right? And you ask them, like, what would you do if there was nothing on you, no other compulsion? Oh, I would go home for sure. Nowhere else in the world I'd rather see. And it's like, we have not done ourselves a favor. Lord knows. We haven't done them a favor either. We've ripped them out. They're rootless. They're groundless. So the GDP goes up.
Right.
Well, they make money. Well, they're going to get to the point where they're like, who cares about this money? I want to see my grandpa and grandma again. Right. I want to spend time where I'm from. We've done nobody favors.
I want to see my home. I want to see my history. So you haven't helped them, the people that you've imported here. You certainly haven't helped their countries, because you've taken the best shot that each of these nations had, their best, their brightest, and taken them away. And you haven't helped our country because you've infused it. Number one, you've crippled these other nations. So now we all have to be a tax farm supporting them. So high taxation for us to right all of our crimes. And then in addition to that, our native population now has to compete with the 0.01% of the very best globally around the world. So you've just, at all three categories, you hurt the nation they came from, you hurt our nation where they came to, and you've hurt the people that you moved.
But you have not hurt the bankers that make lots of money on these software as service companies.
That's right. You have not hurt David Bahnsen.
No.
But we're grifting.
Yeah.
Get that out of my face.
All right.
All right.
I forgot to plug it.
Thanks for tuning in.
If you're in Colorado, fight1312.com. Fight1312.com. That's the website to go to. They're going to be rallying on Wednesday. If you're in the Dallas area, the Anti-Predatory Gambling Association, that's a political action committee. Go there, see if you can donate. Those are the two things locally. Find people, get connected, network, be strategic, play for the long game.
Yep. And for most of you at this point of your life, playing for the long game, being strategic, getting connected, getting involved, primarily what that's going to mean for most of you, not all of you. There will be some individuals, there will be some exceptions, but for most of you, what that means is throwing your hat in the ring with somebody else. It means lending your sword to somebody else. Most of you are not going to be king, but you can help somebody who is called by God to be a king, for him to be able to achieve. And I think a big part of it, honestly, in all of this, a big part of it in terms of virtue is simply it requires humility.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why we don't get things done, is because we constantly spread our forces too thin. And the reason we spread them too thin is not even just, that we're all hopped up on hopium, and wishful thinking, and that we just believe. Part of the problem, we spread our forces too thin because everybody wants, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Everybody wants to be in charge.
Yep.
Everybody wants to, plant a church. Everybody wants to be the guy who runs for political office. Everybody wants to be, and nobody really wants to support what somebody else is already doing. Find somebody who's uniquely gifted by God, and who the Lord, in his providence, in his sovereignty, in his grace, has his hand upon that individual, and that person is already experiencing, they're already reaping success and blessings.
and what they're doing is working and it's growing, and go there and lend your support. It doesn't have to be you. But what you can do is you can find guys that the Lord's already using and shore up the victory that God's providing there.
A good metric is, should I be a pastor? Should I get in politics? Has anyone ever at some point in your life said you should do these things? Not a single person in your whole life has said like, hey, you have a gift for the pastoral, or hey, I think you'd be a really good politician. If nobody said that at any point, you're 30, 35, 40, then honestly, at some level, you're probably not. But if like again and again, people have told you to the point where you can't escape it and you're being solicited for the job, like honestly, like some people like Thomas Massey tried to live in the woods. People were literally begging him, like, please come out and run for this district. I think it was open, so an open primary. Like if you have that happening, well, that's probably a good sign from the Lord that you're called to it. Nobody's told you it. Nobody suggested it. Then get out there and knock some doors for someone else, champ.
Yep. Amen. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again, Lord willing, on Wednesday.